Back in 2000, my friends and I lived together in a neighborhood. It was a well-respected area, little to no crime, nice people, and a beautiful forest around it. A few weeks or so prior, my friend had told us his cat had jumped out of a window and ran into the woods. They set up traps but only caught raccoons. They had recently rescued it from an animal shelter, so they didn't become too attached, but it was still sad. Anyway, we always used to go down to the creek and camp in these woods. One of my friends discovered an old house one day alone, 3 miles or so in the woods, and said it was covered in vines with shrubbery growing all over it, but he didn't enter, so we thought it'd be cool for all of us to go and explore it. So a few days later, the two of us and I set out on a sunny afternoon, and like he said, we ran into this house. It looked about 30 or 40 years old, but beat up. There were no signs of any trails or paths that could have led there. It was completely isolated and abandoned. Before we entered, my friend left his camera inside a bag outside near the entrance. We walked inside to find old mail scattered everywhere. We didn't read all of it, but some were about foreclosure and warnings. The floors were dirty, wood rotted, nails and sharp rusty tools in one corner, and just an overwhelming stench of something dead inside. We continued searching for about 20 minutes and found a staircase. One of my friends went upstairs but stopped as he heard a screeching, angry-like noise. Turns out it was a possum, but we got spooked and decided to leave. After being in there for about 30 minutes or so, we walked outside, and my friend grabs his bag. We begin walking about a mile or so when he realizes his bag felt lighter. He looked inside to find his camera was missing. We went back, but had no luck finding it. He assumed he forgot it on the ground somewhere. It was getting dark, so we thought we'd come back another day and look. It rained the next few days, but we eventually returned to the house. When we got there, we saw it had looked just the same, but damp because of the leaks and rainfall. Everything was gross, but as we kept looking, I came across this filthy rag that looked like it covered something. I lifted it up with a stick and saw it's his camera, perfectly intact. No smudges or dirt, not wet, just like he left it. He grabbed it, and by this time it was getting pretty dark, so we just hustled back because we didn't want to get lost. When we return to his house, he removes the memory card and we look up the images. At first, we saw all his pictures like trees, landscapes, etc. But as we progress, we see blurry images of nothing, it looks like. But then came across something horrific. A few images after the blurry photos showed dead squirrels, birds, rodents, not intact though. Some had been cut open or smashed to death. Their eyes were dangling out, their limbs were cut off. Just a disgusting sight. However, the next few images were really disturbing. There, we saw a cat that was lying like an X. Like it was dissected. Its abdomen was sliced open, organs spewing out, tail removed and wrapped around its neck. But not too long after, my friend recognized the color, size, look of it. It was his cat that had run off. We all immediately became very frightened and sick. He actually went to throw up. He became distressed but confused. We all did. We didn't know what to make of it. He ended up deleting all the photos, even his landscape ones, and put his camera away in his closet. After that, we never went anywhere near that area again, or barely in the woods for that matter. I never wanted to think about it ever again. It's something I forgot about until my friends and I reminisced about our past. It's truly frightening to think who did that, and worst of all, how close they lived.
After finding the subreddit today, and after having posted a very abridged version of this story a couple times in other threads, I asked my mom for the detailed version of the story and thought I'd share it with you kind people. This happened circa 1971-1972, when my mother was about 14 or 15 years old. The incident occurred in a heavily wooded area in Montebello, Alabama, close to Birmingham. My mother is the oldest of 5 children. She has 3 sisters and a brother, who is the baby of the family. One weekend in the cooler months of the fall, my grandfather decided to take the whole family, my grandmother, my mother, and all my aunts and uncles, so 7 people in total, into the woods for target practice with a rifle. My mother grew up quite poor, and they didn't always live in the best neighborhoods, so my grandfather wanted to teach the kids how to defend themselves with the rifle if need be. Like I said, it was later in the fall, so the trees were bare and there were lots of leaves on the ground. The wooded area was just off a dirt road, so this was a fairly rural area they were in. Since it was so far off the beaten path, my grandfather became startled when he heard the roar of a car engine so deep in the woods. My mom remembers the car as being a blue Ford Galaxy. Despite the fact that my grandfather had a gun, he totally freaked out and told my grandma and the kids to hide under a pile of leaves in the woods. He hid with them. The man in the driver's seat got out, dragged a woman's body out of the car, and just dumped her there in the woods and drove away. After my grandfather was sure the man had gone, everyone came out of hiding and the woman sat up and stared them straight in the face. My grandfather asked the woman if she needed help. She said no, she would be fine. She didn't seem to be injured and obviously didn't want help. She hadn't put up a fight with the man when he was dragging her out of the car. So my grandfather cut the shooting lesson short and decided to rush the kids home to safety. Well, on the trail back to the dirt road where my grandfather had parked the car, they passed the man in the blue Ford Galaxy driving out of the woods. My mom looked over and noticed that he had a huge machete laying across the front seat beside him. My grandfather made sure that the man could see that he was carrying a rifle, but everyone was careful not to give away what they had just seen. The man struck up small talk with my grandfather. My grandfather explained that he had just taken his family out for some target practice with the rifle. The man told him to have a nice day and continue driving. The next day, my grandfather went back out to that spot in the woods. There was no body there. However, he did find the woman's wig, her purse, some Kleenex, and a pair of eyeglasses. He collected the items and took them home. According to my grandfather, the area of the woods was known for having shallow graves and being a dumping site for bodies. My mother became hysterical when he walked in the door carrying the stuff. She started screaming, "He killed that lady! He killed that lady!" My grandfather ended up taking the items to the police station, but my mom doesn't think anything ever came of it. She never heard anything else about it after that. Well, she did hear one other thing about it, I guess. Early the next morning, my grandmother called my mom when she arrived at work, just before the kids left for school. She told them not to take the bus that day, that she would come home and pick them up and drive them to school. When my mom asked why, my grandmother said, "Because that car is waiting for you at the bus stop."
This must have happened around 2007 when I was 18 or 19, because I had graduated high school but had not yet gotten my own place. My friend Zach and his brother Chris had their own apartment, so naturally, I was there all the time. One such night, around 2 or 3 a.m., we decided we needed snacks, so decided to walk to a nearby gas station, cutting through a small wooded area to get there. Cutting through the woods again on our way back to the apartment, I noticed a man walking the opposite direction. He was of average height, but very stocky and strong looking. He was wearing a black zip-up hoodie with the hood up over a hat, and had a long red beard. He looked to only be a few years older than us. He was staring intently at me as he walked past. "Geez, what's that guy's problem?" I said to Chris. "What guy?" he responded. I turn around to point him out, and noticed that he moved to our left side, where he was on our right side when he first passed. Also, he was now facing our direction. I mentioned something about this to Chris and Zach, and we pick up our pace. I turn around again to see if he's still there. This time he's peeking out from behind a tree, watching us. Shit, I say, I think that guy is following us. I turn around again, and he's jogging towards us. He shouts at us,
"Hey, what are you doing out here?"
We tell him that we were just coming from the gas station. He responds with something along the lines of us being liars and that we must be up to no good. At this point, he's walking next to us. Chris tells him that we don't do anything but drink Coke and play video games.
"Oh, so you do coke?"
he says. We come out of the woods and my friend's apartment is in sight, but this is where it went from creepy to terrifying. He jumps in front of us, blocking our paths. He calls us liars again, looks past us and says,
"Isn't that right, guys?"
I turn around and see two more men walking quickly towards us. I have no idea where they came from. We were so focused on the beard guy that we didn't see or hear anything else until then. Another voice calls something out, and there are two more guys next to Beard Guy. Beard Guy points to me and accuses me of robbing his apartment. The five of them form a semicircle around the three of us. I deny any robbery, but Beard Guy says he would recognize me anywhere. Beard Guy says,
"I'm getting my money back,"
and begins to pull something out of his pocket. We run. One of them goes to grab me but misses. We run around the corner towards the apartment and decided that it's not a good idea to go in because we don't want them to know where my friends live. We run for a while longer until we thought we lost them, then went back to the apartment. Zach called the cops, but they never came. I think it's because he told them that mysterious people appeared from the trees, which is not an inaccurate description, but it doesn't convey the seriousness of the situation. We didn't see them again after that, but we were shaken up for a while. I don't know what might have happened if we didn't get away.
This happened to me back in 2008 when I was 16 years old. I was pretty high at the time, so I could have just been having a bad trip and being paranoid, but I thought about it a lot and I feel like I just managed to escape a dangerous situation. I had just turned 16, which is kind of a big deal, and instead of being at home celebrating with my friends, I was stuck in a town hundreds of kilometers away from them. It was a beautiful, vibrant town. I just didn't know anyone there, except for Dave. He was 21 years old, and I really did not know him well. I had met him once when he visited my hometown, but I was lonely, and as a 16-year-old, spending your birthday alone is literally the worst thing, so I was desperate to have some fun. Dave invited me to go on an overnight trance festival with him and his friends. At first, my mom was completely against the idea, but Dave agreed to meet up with my family, and I pretended to know him a lot better than I really did. He was a very mild-mannered and charming boy, and this, coupled with the fact that my mom felt bad for my 16th birthday being so shitty, was enough to convince my mom to let me go. I was so excited. I was going to my first festival, and with older guys. It was going to be the best birthday ever. The festival was being held in the middle of a wooded area about an hour's drive from where I was staying with my parents. This is relevant later. I had never met Dave's friends, but they seemed okay. The one guy made me feel a little uncomfortable, and he kept looking at me like I was food. We'll call him Mike, because I don't remember his name. I wasn't going to let that ruin my evening, though. The night started with us smoking some weed, which I was no stranger to. Then they convinced me to snort some MDMA. It was my first time, but I was no stranger to drugs, so I obliged. We then went to the dance floor, and I had a blast. I was way too high to care about anything but the music and the way it felt to move my body. I started feeling a little overwhelmed being in the thick of it, so I moved off to the side where I could still hear and dance to the music, but be a bit more chill. I slowly became aware of a conversation taking place behind me. The voice was saying odd things.
"See that girl? She's one of my friends. She knows how to treat you right. Just see how well she moves. She does look good."
First man then goes on to describe all the things his girl can do. Some pretty intense sexual things. I was like, man, this girl sounds hardcore. I even looked around to try and spot her. There were a couple of ladies nearby, but I had no idea of knowing which one it was, so I just carried on dancing. After a while, the first man encouraged the other to go and dance with this girl, so she would give him a taste of what she can do. And to my surprise, this man comes and tries to start dancing with me. I stopped dead, looked at him, and then turned around to see who was calling me his girl. And there's Mike standing and leering at us. I'm standing there in shock when Dave rushes over, whispers, "We have to go," and pulls me off the dance floor. I go with him, thinking of him as my savior, and he takes me over to some jungle gyms overlooking the festival. I managed to find a comfortable corner of the jungle gym and was just enjoying the evening air, the fire dancers, and the distant dance floor when I spot Mike fairly close by in an animated conversation with the guy from earlier. The guy finally hands over some money, and I was just puzzling this over when Dave and his friends come over to the place I was happily ensconced. They surround me and offer me a line of something. I ask what it is, but they won't tell me, so I decline. There are 4 of them standing very, very close to me, completely trapping me as I have a pole at my back. One is shining a torch in my face, and they will just not take no for an answer. They badgered me for what felt like 10 minutes before I finally gave in. As soon as I had taken the line, Dave says we should head to the car. I was already way too suspicious to ever want to go to the car, so I asked if I could just go and dance real quick, and then I'd go with them. I ran off to the dance floor, pretending to be excited to get dancing, and pushed my way right into the thick of the crowd. From there, I worked my way to the front and then slipped into the surrounding woods. I hid behind the closest tent and tried to plan out what to do next, when my phone blew up with texts and calls from them asking where I was. I had literally been gone for like 2 minutes. Why were they so worried? I began moving stealthily from one tent to the next, hiding behind trees and being extremely paranoid. As I was switching hiding places, I heard 2 guys approaching, so I dove into some bushes. I had no idea who they were, and I was about to ask them to help me when I heard the one describing my exact outfit and description to the other. I was so scared. How did they know who I was, and why were they looking for me? I just had no idea what to do. I was scared that if I phoned my mom, I would get into huge trouble, and who knew how long it would take her to get there. I had no idea who to trust, and no plan. I just continued moving through the woods, feeling hopeless and terrified, when I spotted a campfire. I ran towards it, and when I emerged, there was a group of about 15 very high-looking hippies, jamming music and having a good time. So I sat with them. They welcomed me warmly and let me sit with them for the remainder of the night. I didn't tell them what was going on. I wasn't sure I believed it myself. After a few hours, Dave finally found me and tried to get me to leave with him. I refused, so he just sat there until sunrise. I then called my mom to come and fetch me. I didn't want to call her at an ungodly hour. I went home and never spoke to Dave again. So Dave, Mike, and the rest of your crew, I never ever want to meet you again. Edit. So many mistakes. Proofread your stuff, people. Edit. Thank you so much for your kind words. For those of you asking why I didn't report them, I wish I had. Unfortunately, I'd been let down by adults before this, and mostly just blame myself for what happened. I wish I could report them now, but 1, I don't know their surnames, and 2, I live in a country where the police force is worse than useless.
Despite a few creepy instances as a child, there has only been one time in my adult life that I have truly felt primal fear. My apology if it's a little long, but trust I am being as concise as possible and need to explain the surroundings a little at first. I live in a village in the middle of the English countryside. To paint an accurate picture of its size, it has a population of 4,000, but feels more like 1,000 due to its spread out nature and being surrounded on all sides by lots of fields, farms and woods that eventually connect into a pretty famous forest. It's kind of in the middle of nowhere, and because of this has notoriously bad phone and internet connections. Having lived here all my life, I knew the place like the back of my hand. I know where all the public footpaths through the woods are, where they connect, which are shortcuts, where to cross deep streams, etc. I have gone on walks in this area throughout my childhood with my parents and alone as an adult. Nothing bad had happened. I felt safe here. This story takes place last summer in July after I moved back home from university. Had yet to get a job and smoked a lot of weed, a habit my parents despised and which I tried to keep hidden from them by going for evening walks. Multiple pre-rolled joints hidden away in my hoodie pocket. As usual, on this day they both got home at 5 p.m. We had dinner but chatted for a while longer than usual as my mom had quite a hectic day and was telling me about it. Because of this, I ended up heading out for my walk an hour later than routine, around 7 p.m. But as it was summer, the sun was still shining, so honestly, I didn't really notice that it would start getting dark while I was still out. The woodland closest to my house is less than 5 minutes away and you enter through a gate into a farmer's field. You can see across the open area quite far until the first set of small woods obscures your view. That's where I was heading as I knew this track takes under 2 hours, and leads back into the same path I was standing on now. More than enough time to smoke 3 joints in my pocket and for the smell to leave my clothing, I had thought. This entire area is very popular for dog walkers, so it's not unusual to see other people while you are about, and as this is a village, everybody says hello to everybody. I lit my first joint and started walking. I'm just in my own world for a while until I was less than 100 feet before the entrance to the woods. An elderly man was coming out of them throwing a ball for his collie dog. I finished my joint and stubbed it out. As I got closer, I recognized it was John who lived on the road next to mine and knew my grandpa. We stopped and said hello as I pet his dog, Max. While talking, I see another man coming out of the woods. No dog, bright green jacket, very tall and had a good 10 years on me age-wise. Me and John chat another minute and say goodbye. He warns me not to stay out here too long as it will start getting dark soon. True, the sky was bright pink and orange. The sun was indeed beginning to set. I hadn't really noticed. I continued on down the path towards the man. When we were nearly passing each other, I look up to make brief eye contact, smile, and say hello, like everyone here does, even if you don't recognize the person. My eyes intently met his. He was already looking at me. His dark eyes locked on mine. He wasn't smiling. I didn't know him at all, but I knew something was wrong. It was in his eyes. I swallowed my politeness and looked at the ground as we passed. I had lived in my university city the past couple of years, so I knew a red flag when I saw one, and my country bumpkin's manners evaporated. I quickened my pace a little, and before entering the woods, I slightly looked back. The guy was still walking in the same direction, following John. I felt relieved, laughed, cursed the weed for making me paranoid while lighting up another joint and started walking into the woods. It takes about 30 minutes to follow the path through the woods to the end. The pathway exit opened into another field that led to another set of woods. The sky was now violet, the dimming light having been obscured to me by the trees. I was already smoking my last joint and was near the entrance to the second set of woods when I felt it. Fear. Complete, crippling, absolute fear worked its way like electricity through every layer of flesh. I'd never felt anything like it before or since, but I knew what it was. I whipped around. Standing at the exit of the first set of woods was the man. I could still make out his green jacket in the fading light. He fucking doubled back, and very quickly too. I had looked back several times at those trees and he hadn't been there. For a second I froze, as did he. He knew I'd seen him. To sprint the distance between us would take him about 5 minutes. He was obviously in good shape. I threw the joint and fucking bolted into the woods, the only way I could go. I didn't dare look behind me. I sprinted for a couple of minutes before taking a sharp left turn off the path into the trees, hoping to throw him off a bit, but I couldn't see a fucking thing. The light was already darkening and the trees made it 100 times worse, especially as I was now in the thick of them, their branches catching on my clothes like fingers, whipping and scratching my bare legs so bad I bled. I ran and ran, my lungs protesting in pain, hating me for smoking so much, while my heart was throwing itself against my rib cage trying to escape. I couldn't anymore. I threw myself on the ground and behind a particularly thick trunk, my back against it, knees to my chest, hand thrown over my mouth to stifle my labored breathing, desperately trying to pump air into my lungs for the next sprint. I listened for the first time. A few seconds pass slightly, then I hear him. Heavy footfall snapping twigs behind me and about 20 feet to my left. I dare not look in case he sees me. I have my phone, but I know I have little chance of a signal being where I was, and knew he'd either hear me talking or see the light from the display. I'm not ashamed to say at this point I started to cry, the tears falling slightly down my cheeks. "What the fuck?" I hear a deep voice exclaim. "Where are you? I know you were here. I saw you." I have to clasp both hands across my mouth to stop my scream escaping. I could hear him moving around. I panic and find enough courage to slowly peek from behind the tree. He was about 10 feet behind me, less than 20 feet to the left, with his back to me. I moved back and my eyes searched the area around me. I pick up a pretty heavy rock. I carefully check on him again. His back is still turned, but he's searching the trees, hunched down lower to the ground now. I make a snap decision, and with everything I had left, I threw the rock behind me and to the right. It clattered through the branches of trees and made one hell of a noise. I watched him immediately bolt in its direction, laughing. He fucking laughed. I paused a little, hearing his footsteps get quieter until I thought I wouldn't be so visible to him if I moved and threw myself forward. I ran, trying to put as much distance between us as possible, but I was also aware that I was getting further and further away from home. I knew there had to be a stream somewhere close. If I found the stream, I could follow it as it borders the land and ran parallel to some of the footpaths. I ran and ran until the trees finally cleared and I could just make out another field through them on the other side. I thank God and push myself a little bit further till I'm out of the trees, and the ground disappears from below my feet and I go head over shoulders down the stream embankment. I crash into the water below, my open mouth and lungs filling with muddy water. As I spit it out, I feel both relieved to have found the stream and terrified he's heard me. My phone is now ruined. I slowly make my way downstream as quiet as possible, listening out for him the whole time as the stream borders the woods, looking up periodically just in case. After a while, maybe a half an hour, I notice the trees begin to thin out and realize this is the edge of the woods where I would have been exiting and where the pathway connected to the original one I'd started on. If I ran, I could get home in less than 20 minutes. As quiet as I could, I dragged myself on my stomach back up the embankment army style, wanting to stay as low as possible. I peeked over the top. I could just make out the opening of the wood's exit path about 50 feet away. I sat and scanned the forest line for a couple of minutes, my eyes trying to make out movement despite it now being pitch black. Nothing. I couldn't hear anything either. I pushed myself up and sprinted as fast as I could across the field into the pathway. I knew the gate I'd entered through was in the adjoining field. It really wasn't far. I was so happy. "You fucking bitch!" came a screech from across the field. I swear my legs nearly gave out then and there. He had been waiting for me. I turned my head and saw him sprinting out of the woods at full speed. I screamed and pushed myself further, tears coating my face. All I could do is run. I crossed into the main field now and I could see the moonlight shining off the metal gate. My house was just 5 minutes away after that. I have never focused on anything as much as that gate. He was faster than me and getting closer, screaming at me the whole time about how he was going to slit my throat. I ran and ran, pushing myself up and over the gate and ran up the road. I dared look as I made the turning for my road. He was still fucking following me. I raced up my driveway and threw myself through the door, running into the living room, crying and screaming hysterically. Pointing behind me towards the door, my dad ran outside while my mom grabbed a hold of me as I collapsed, shaking. As it turns out, my parents had already called the police. As I said, I was going out for an hour or so at 7, and it was now past 12 a.m., and I hadn't answered when they called my now broke phone. Very unlike me. We called the police again to explain. They came and gave a full statement. Both my parents and the police were horrified. Nothing like this happens here. There hasn't been a reported rape or murder in the last 100 years. But one look at me and it was obvious I was telling the truth. I was covered head to toe in cuts and bruises, soaking wet and covered in mud and blood. I won't go into how this experience changed me. It's depressing, but I will say the thing that scares me the most is that they never even had a suspect. Despite him following me so closely, he was gone by the time my dad ran outside. That guy is still out there, and who knows what he's really capable of. Hey guys, thank you all for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that subscribe button and join the Nightmare Army. I'm always looking for new soldiers in my Nightmare Nation. So I want to give a big thank you to Goodnite Goosebumps for joining me on my Collaboration Tuesday videos. Thank you so much, man, and if you guys haven't, please check out Goodnite Goosebumps. I think he's pretty awesome, and I definitely think you guys will enjoy him. And besides, anybody that has the name of my favorite television show growing up in the 90s is awesome in my book. So thank you, man. Once again, you're awesome. Goodnite Goosebumps. Anyways, guys, I just want to give you guys a little bit of a feedback on the last story that I narrated in the video. I'm sorry if towards the ending of that story the audio kind of jumps a little bit. I apologize about that. It was a little bit of an editing mistake that I didn't notice until now. So I'm really sorry about that. Please forgive me. It won't happen again. And to give you guys a little bit of an update on the Q&A that I posted not too long ago on my 10,000 subscriber thank you video, I'm probably going to be uploading that on Saturday, if not maybe Sunday, just because I have a lot of things to do during the week between stories and other stuff in general. So look forward to that on the weekend. Hopefully I'll be able to get it out Saturday or Sunday for you guys and answer all of your questions, which that is a video that I am really looking forward to doing. I've always wanted to do a Q&A, so hopefully this will be really good. So as always, guys, thank you all for watching, and just remember, the best ideas always come out of nightmares.